This story takes you deep into Yellowstone at winter's end, where a starving bobcat mother fights for her life and her unborn kittens, and a mate risks everything: his instincts, his fear, his pride, just to ask for help in a world that doesn't often give it. On a night when every law and every heart was tested, two rangers chose compassion over caution, breaking the rules to save a family that might have vanished without a trace. It's a story about courage found in unlikely places, and the wild ways love refuses to let go. If you've ever needed a reason to believe in small miracles, or wondered if empathy could change more than one life, this is for you. Share your feelings below, and please hit like and subscribe to the channel if you want to support more true stories of wildness, healing, and second chances. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Let's listen for hope together. Have you ever wondered what a heartbeat sounds like when it's pressed right up against the edge of survival? As the last light of early spring slips away, Yellowstone's forests come alive with hidden stories, secrets and silent struggles unfolding beneath the melting snow. Streams of ice-cold water race down the mountainsides, swelling the rivers. The trees stand tall and watchful, guarding a world both ancient and fragile, and every shift of the wind is a reminder that winter isn't quite ready to let go. Deep beneath the tangled roots of a fallen pine, in a secret den, Lucy curled up in the close, earthy dark. Her fur was streaked with last year's pale, dusty leaves, and her breath trembled in the heavy air. Outside, the last traces of sunlight slipped through the trees, throwing long shadows across her small refuge. But tonight, her sanctuary felt tighter than ever, heavy with both fear and hope. Lucy wasn't just any wild animal. She was a bobcat and a mother on the edge. Her belly was swollen with new life, but her body was thin and worn from weeks of coming up empty in her hunts. The snow had stuck around too long, hiding the trails where she and her mate Tyler once tracked rabbits and squirrels. Now, with the rivers running high and prey in hiding, every single day felt like a toss of the dice. Every meal a memory fading into hunger. Tyler was always the bold one. His coat was thick, and a deep scar notched his left ear, a souvenir from a long-ago winter fight with a rival tomcat. He moved through the woods like he owned them, paws silent on the moss, eyes sharp, head high. But tonight, even Tyler was restless. He paced back and forth at the den's narrow entrance, stopping every few steps to listen, ears straining for trouble, or maybe for the promise of returning prey. The moon, half shrouded by fast-moving clouds, wasn't offering much comfort. Inside, Lucy couldn't stay still. Pain jolted through her side, sudden and sharp, ringing a low cry from her throat. She tried to steady her breathing, willing herself to hold out just a little longer, but nature was calling the shots. The kittens were coming. Too soon, maybe. Or maybe just in time. But she wasn't ready. Not like this. Not this week. At the sound of her pain, Tyler turned at once, squeezing into the cramped den. His yellow eyes were wild with worry and love. For a heartbeat, he just looked at her, torn between the urge to comfort her and the helplessness of knowing he couldn't stop what was coming. He pressed his nose to her cheek, rumbling a soft encouragement, but Lucy's shivers wouldn't let up. Outside, the dusk settled in. The forest grew quieter, the birds giving way to the far-off howl of a coyote. Shadows bunched at the base of the trees, and the air grew colder, sharper. Somewhere far away, a raven's call cracked through the stillness, a warning from the wild. And in that deepening twilight, Tyler made a choice. He slipped out of the den, pausing just long enough to look back. Lucy's wide, shining eyes pleading for something he couldn't give. Then he vanished into the growing dark, a flash of muscle and desperation, hunting for anything that might save them. But prey was scarce. The riverbanks, usually teeming with small life, were flooded and dangerous. Tyler prowled the undergrowth, nostrils flaring, every sense strained. A mouse darted across a stone. Tyler lunged, but it vanished in the roots. Hunger burned in his belly, sharp and cruel. Back in the den, Lucy fought waves of pain. The contractions came faster, squeezing the strength from her limbs. She dug her claws into the soft dirt, panting. Her vision blurred, edges darkening as exhaustion pulled at her. The memory of warmth, of full bellies and gentle spring sun, felt impossibly far away. Suddenly, a violent spasm wrenched her body. She whimpered, the sound swallowed by the earth. This was not how it was supposed to be. She was supposed to be strong, like her mother before her, like all the wild mothers whose stories were written in tracks and scents. But strength felt like a story for another life. Tyler returned, empty-jawed and frantic. He pressed himself close to Lucy, wrapping his body around hers. She was burning with fever, her breath uneven. For the first time, Tyler felt a fear he could not chase away, an enemy he could not fight with teeth or claws. He licked her ears, nudged her side, desperate for some sign she would endure. A moment passed, then another. Lucy's eyes closed, then fluttered open. She tried to stand, her legs trembling but collapsed, her body refusing to listen. Tyler yowled, a raw, wild sound that cut through the forest. It was a call no bobcat should ever have to make. A plea, not for territory or mate, but for help, for mercy. High above, the moon slid behind a cloud. The forest listened. Have you ever seen love and fear wrestle in an animal's eyes? In that hidden den at the edge of night, Tyler risked everything, not just for Lucy, but for the promise of a new dawn. As her cries faded into the cold, the world outside seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere, far off, a light flickered in the darkness. But for now, the only thing that mattered was the struggle inside that den, the ancient, unstoppable drive to survive, and the unspoken vow to never, ever give up. And so, as the shadows lengthened and the wild held its secrets close, the story of Lucy and Tyler began, not with triumph, but with a question that echoed through every living thing. How far would you go for love when the world is determined to take everything away? Darkness crept deeper into the heart of Yellowstone, and with it, the night's dangers multiplied. Lucy's body shook in the den, sweat and agony clouding her mind as another wave of pain struck. The birth wasn't progressing. Each contraction felt less hopeful, more desperate, an animal's battle between life and death. Her cries grew raw, echoing in the narrow hollow, a sound that would make even the bravest heart falter. Tyler, frantic and out of options, felt a wild instinct stirring, an urge older than memory. He pressed his nose against Lucy's cheek, then stepped out into the night, ears flattened and heart pounding. He didn't know why he did it, only that the forest was too indifferent, too silent, and that no bobcat could win this fight alone. His yowls grew louder, carrying through the trees and across the cold air, a desperate call flung into the void. Miles away, at the edge of the park, two rangers stood outside their small, battered outpost. Floodlights cut the darkness in wide, pale arcs, reflecting off damp moss and the battered hood of an old pickup. Inside, Ranger Evelyn Hayes leaned over a flickering radio, listening for any report of lost hikers or trouble on the trails. Her partner, Marcus Lane, checked gear for the next morning's patrol, grumbling about the chill that still clung to everything, refusing to yield to spring. Then, the night was pierced by an eerie, unnatural sound. A bobcat's yowl, high, urgent, carrying something more than territorial bravado. Evelyn froze. She'd heard bobcats before, but never like this. There was a tremor in the cry, something close to pleading. Marcus looked up, brow furrowed. "Did you hear that?" Evelyn asked quietly, stepping outside. The noise echoed again, closer this time. Not just a call, but a warning, a signal. For a moment, neither ranger moved. Then the radio crackled to life, a dispatcher's voice mumbling about a possible animal in distress. Evelyn's heart beat faster. Marcus frowned. That could be trouble. Could be a wounded cat, or something spooked it. Or maybe it's just bait. Wolves, even a bear. We go poking around at night. It could get messy. Evelyn looked at him, searching his face for the old compassion she knew he kept buried beneath layers of caution and protocol. "It's not normal. Something's wrong out there, Marcus. We can't just ignore it." He shook his head, but not unkindly. "Ev, park policy is clear. We're supposed to keep out of it, unless it's an obvious emergency. What if it's a trap? You know how unpredictable bobcats can be, especially now. Mating season, hunger, all that." The words stung, but Evelyn couldn't look away. She remembered, not so long ago, kneeling on the floor as a child, holding her dying cat after it had been struck by a car. The helplessness, the unanswered questions, and the aching wish that someone, anyone, had done more. "I have to check," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "If it's a mother, if she's hurt or trapped, we're her only chance. We've got the field kit, and I know these woods. I won't do anything reckless." Marcus hesitated, caught between duty and friendship. Then he grabbed his flashlight and slung a medical kit over his shoulder. "Fine, but we do it by the book. No heroics." Evelyn nodded, adrenaline and dread warring in her chest. She radioed their plans to headquarters, knowing full well she might get an earful later for overstepping. The two rangers geared up, tranquilizer darts, field fluids, gloves, blankets, every bit of emergency gear they could carry. As they set out into the trees, the beam of their flashlights sliced through the mist, painting white streaks on the damp ground. Back in the den, Lucy whimpered, each breath shorter than the last. She felt herself drifting in and out, the edges of her world growing fuzzy. Tyler returned, pressing close, trying to warm her with his presence, but she hardly noticed. Her body was heavy, limbs weak. Her kittens kicked weakly inside her, their lives twined with hers. Outside, Tyler's desperate yowling grew more frantic. He darted toward the edge of the trees, risking exposure. For a bobcat, it was the ultimate act of trust, approaching the realm of humans, the beings who were both feared and misunderstood. He yowled again, louder, his eyes wide and desperate. Evelyn and Marcus pushed through the brush, following the sound. Each time the yowl echoed, Evelyn's resolve grew stronger. She imagined the animal out there, lost, hurting, not so different from any mother or father in the world. Her boots sank into melting snow, soaking her socks. The air smelled of mud and thawed pine needles. "Up there," Marcus whispered, shining his light at a dense tangle of roots ahead. A pair of glowing eyes flashed in the beam, wild and gold. Tyler stood his ground, not running as most bobcats would. His body was tense, tail low, but he didn't back away. "That's not normal," Marcus murmured. "He's asking us for something." Evelyn took a cautious step forward, voice soft. "Hey, buddy, we're not here to hurt you." Tyler hissed, but did not flee. In that charged moment, two worlds hovered at the brink, wild and human, predator and protector, separated by fear and history. Evelyn's hand trembled as she fished a tranquilizer from her pocket, not sure whether she'd need it for defense or for help. Marcus looked at her. "We're really doing this, huh?" Evelyn nodded, feeling the burden of choice settle on her shoulders. "We are. Get the kit ready. This isn't just any night." As the last shreds of daylight faded, they readied their supplies, racing the darkness that pressed in on every side. Somewhere inside, Lucy clung to life. Tyler, caught between instinct and hope, refused to let the wild claim his family without a fight. Could trust be found, on either side, when the stakes were this high? The answer hung in the cold air as the Rangers crept closer, hearts pounding with equal parts fear and determination, and the story teetered on the edge of a new chapter. The night thickened, sinking its claws into the forest and stealing every trace of warmth from the air. In the cramped darkness of the den, Lucy drifted between worlds, caught in a haze of pain, memory, and fading hope. Her breath rasped through clenched teeth, each exhale growing softer as her body weakened. She blinked, trying to focus on the earthy ceiling overhead, but everything shimmered, dissolving into the pulsing red-black blur behind her eyes. Outside, Tyler lingered at the den's mouth, still and silent except for the restless twitch of his tail. He could smell everything: mud, melting snow, distant smoke from the ranger outpost, and Lucy's sweat thick with fear. He pressed his ear to the ground, feeling her pain vibrate up through the soil. In the wild, there was no room for helplessness. But tonight, instinct and love tangled inside him, both fighting for control. Lucy's mind wandered to softer times: sun-warmed rocks, wildflowers, Tyler brushing against her side after a long hunt, her mother's purr, low and steady, echoing from the past. Now, even as agony racked her body, she tried to remember those things, to hold them close against the dark. But the dark was winning. Her kittens pressed against her, alive but still waiting, and Lucy knew what it meant if she failed now. A quiet end, hidden from the world. Another secret lost to the spring melt. Nature offered no guarantees, and the mountains carried the stories of 1,000 such silent losses. Outside, Evelyn and Marcus moved quietly through the trees, flashlights dancing over bark and stone. Evelyn's chest tightened with every crunch of snow beneath her boots. Each step brought her closer to the source of the Bobcat's desperate calls, but also deeper into a personal landscape of memory and regret. She remembered the day her childhood cat, Sugar, disappeared, a flash of fur in the headlights, her tiny form limp in her father's arms. Evelyn had been helpless, too small to do anything but cry, and promise she'd never look away again. That old ache throbbed inside her as she followed Tyler's path. She'd joined the ranger service to protect, to save what could be saved. But tonight, the old rules, never interfere, let nature be, felt impossibly cruel. Marcus lagged behind, glancing over his shoulder every few seconds. "We need to be careful, Ev. Last thing we want is a wounded bobcat, or worse, a mother turning on us." Evelyn ignored the warning. Her focus tunneled in on the task. "Keep your dart ready, but don't use it unless you have to. I'll talk to him if he lets me." As they approached the den, Tyler stood frozen in the beam of Evelyn's flashlight. His chest heaved, but he didn't bolt. The wildness in his eyes flickered with something more: a plea, a question, hope. Evelyn crouched, making herself small, It's okay, boy. We're not here to hurt you. Show me. Tyler hesitated, then, with a guttural yowl, turned and vanished into the undergrowth. Evelyn followed, breath shallow, nerves jangling. Marcus muttered a curse and hurried after her. Inside the den, Lucy felt the tremors of their approach, a vibration in the ground, the faintest new scent in the air. Fear spiked. She let out a ragged yowl, claws scoring the dirt. Her mind flickered with images of danger. Coyotes, bears, even wolves. She tried to drag herself upright, but her limbs failed her. The pain, once dull and distant, now blazed hot and immediate. Tyler reappeared at her side, nuzzling her forehead, his purr rough and anxious. She closed her eyes, feeling his warmth. Her heart beat with his, wild, unsteady, refusing to give up. Evelyn stopped just outside the den, eyes wide. She's right there. Oh, God, she's in bad shape. Marcus caught up, whispering, Don't get too close. She'll tear you up if she thinks you're a threat. For a moment, the two rangers just watched. Lucy's sides heaved. Her pupils were blown wide, her mouth open and dry. Tyler growled low, placing himself between Lucy and the humans. Evelyn felt the hair rise on her arms. In that instant, time slowed. Outside, the world kept spinning. A coyote howled, wind rattled dead leaves, somewhere an owl called. Inside, everything shrank to a single, desperate struggle. A wild mother clinging to life, her mate refusing to abandon her. Two humans caught between protocol and empathy. Evelyn's voice was soft, trembling. You have to trust me. I'm here to help. She eased the field kit open, hands shaking, and glanced at Marcus. If she goes for me, use the dart. Otherwise, just cover me. Marcus grunted. This is insane, you know. I know. Evelyn's eyes shone with tears she refused to let fall. She crawled forward, heart thudding, moving as slowly as she could. Tyler bared his teeth, but when Evelyn stopped just outside the den's mouth, he didn't attack. Lucy stared at her, wild and glassy-eyed. Evelyn tried not to see her childhood cat in that face, tried not to let memory cloud her judgment. Lucy's head dropped. A soft, broken sound escaped her, more sigh than growl. She was exhausted, lost, and perhaps in the final moment, willing to accept a stranger's mercy. Evelyn reached out with a gloved hand, offering a shallow bowl of water. Tyler sniffed it, then looked at Lucy. She barely responded. Evelyn's heart twisted. Outside, the coyote's howls rose, joined by the shrill scream of a hawk somewhere far off. The world felt enormous and indifferent, a place where life and death balanced on the thinnest of threads. Inside the den, Tyler pressed himself closer to Lucy, tucking her head beneath his chin. Evelyn, just feet away, whispered, Hang on, just hang on a little longer. Marcus watched, tense, dart at the ready. This is against everything they ever taught us, Ev. Evelyn nodded, eyes never leaving Lucy. Sometimes what's right isn't in the manual. As the hours dragged on, Lucy's breath slowed, but did not stop. Tyler did not move from her side, his body a shield against everything the night could throw at them. The rangers watched in silence, feeling the weight of nature's indifference and the fierce persistence of love. What is love, if not holding on through the storm? In that wild, fragile den, with death closing in and hope flickering like a candle in the wind, they all waited for dawn, or for an answer that might never come. The moon stood high above the Yellowstone canopy, its cold light seeping between the jagged branches. All around the den, the forest was a tapestry of silver and shadow, deceptively calm, the wild holding its breath. Inside that fragile den, the boundaries between wildness and compassion were dissolving, tested by the oldest struggle on Earth. Evelyn knelt just outside the entrance, her knees pressed into the cold, wet ground. She barely noticed the ache. Her hands shook as she unzipped the emergency kit, each motion heavy with the weight of decision. She knew she was crossing an invisible line tonight, a line rangers were trained to respect, the ancient boundary between letting nature run its course and stepping in. But as she listened to Lucy's ragged breathing, she knew there was no going back. "Marcus," she whispered, "hold the light steady. If she moves, just be ready. But don't shoot unless you absolutely have to." Marcus was silent for a moment. He was no stranger to danger. He'd been in bear standoffs and seen more than one predator up close. But this was different. He could feel the gravity in Evelyn's voice. "You sure about this, Ev?" Evelyn glanced at him, her face caught between fear and conviction. "No, but I can't stand here and do nothing." She reached forward, inch by careful inch, until her gloved fingers touched Lucy's side. The bobcat shivered, eyes flickering with a strange combination of pain and trust. Tyler pressed himself protectively against Lucy, but did not lash out. He watched Evelyn, wild suspicion in his gaze, but some deeper part of him seemed to sense her intent. Lucy was barely conscious, her breaths shallow and uneven. Evelyn's heart hammered as she examined the queen's swollen belly, feeling for any movement. Kittens still alive, still waiting to be born. She could feel the slow flutter, the fragile promise of life. But Lucy was failing, her strength spent. Outside, the night pressed closer. Coyotes yipped in the distance, and the river's roar grew louder as snowmelt rushed down from the mountains. The world felt impossibly vast, and this den impossibly small. Evelyn pulled a tranquilizer from her kit. "Marcus, I'm going to have to sedate her just enough to move her. We can't help her here. She needs more than we've got in this dirt. There's that old field tent just half a mile out. We can make a clinic there. Try to save her and the kittens." Marcus hesitated, chewing his lip. "If headquarters finds out, if something goes wrong, this is all on us." Evelyn's hands shook, but she didn't back down. "I'll take the heat. Just help me." She loaded the dart and, with infinite care, pressed it against Lucy's flank. The sedative was mild, just enough to ease her pain and keep her from panicking during the move. Lucy barely reacted, too exhausted to fight. The next minutes were a blur. Marcus and Evelyn, moving as quietly and gently as possible, lifted Lucy onto a canvas tarp, her head lolling between them. Tyler paced, agitated, circling the humans and churring anxiously. His loyalty was unmistakable. He would not abandon Lucy, not now, not ever. They moved through the woods, flashlight beams bobbing ahead. Each step was slow, careful. Branches scraped their faces and boots slipped in the slush, but they pressed on. Evelyn's arms ached, but she didn't dare pause. Every minute counted. When they reached the field tent, Marcus ducked inside first, yanking aside old camping gear to clear a patch of floor. Evelyn laid Lucy down on a pile of blankets, then began setting up their makeshift clinic. Saline drips from a bent tent pole, clean towels, the little oxygen mask they'd almost left behind. All the while, Tyler sat just outside the tent, watching every move, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Evelyn's internal conflict gnawed at her. Was she saving a life, or interfering with a process older than any rulebook? Would helping Lucy mean dooming another animal that should have taken her place in the wild's cruel lottery? She couldn't know. All she knew was the undeniable pull, an aching empathy that overpowered her training. She stroked Lucy's head gently, whispering, "Hold on. Your story isn't finished yet." Marcus hovered by the radio, arguing with headquarters. "Yeah, she's in bad shape. No, we couldn't just leave her. She was dying, and the mate came to us, for God's sake." I know, I'll file the paperwork." He caught Evelyn's eye and gave a small, resigned shrug. Inside the tent, Evelyn hooked up fluids, checked Lucy's heartbeat, monitored her temperature. She wiped sweat from her brow, not daring to rest. The world outside the canvas walls felt like another planet, one where time and fate were all that mattered. Meanwhile, Tyler inched closer, sniffing at the flap. Marcus blocked him at first, but Evelyn waved him off. "Let him in. He needs to see her. They need each other." Tyler padded softly to Lucy's side, settling beside her, their bodies pressed together as if nothing, no law, no species, no boundary, could come between them. Evelyn watched, a lump in her throat. In their silent connection, she saw something she hadn't known she'd lost. Faith in the stubborn resilience of love. She whispered, almost to herself, "Where does wildness end and compassion begin?" Sometimes the line is thinner than we imagine. The tent was quiet except for the machines and Lucy's ragged breaths. Evelyn squeezed her hand around Lucy's paw. "Don't you dare give up," she said softly, as outside, Tyler's purr vibrated through the floor. In that makeshift clinic, under the indifferent gaze of the moon, hope flickered in the darkness, not as a guarantee, but as a stubborn refusal to surrender. The hours after midnight were always the coldest, and as the wind whipped at the sides of the old field tent, Evelyn and Marcus fought exhaustion and dread in equal measure. Shadows flickered against the canvas walls, thrown by the glow of lanterns and the small, sputtering heater they'd rigged for Lucy's sake. The only constant was the relentless sound of Lucy's labored breathing, thin and unsteady, mixing with the faint, comforting rumble of Tyler's purr as he watched over her. Evelyn worked quickly, fingers stiff with cold and anxiety, swabbing Lucy's nose and mouth, checking her vital signs, and trying to coax her awake between contractions. Every few minutes, she'd feel a weak, fluttering kick in Lucy's swollen belly, a reminder that the fight wasn't just for the mother, but for the lives still curled up inside her, waiting for a world they might never see. Marcus moved between the radio and the field table, fielding calls from headquarters, updating the logbook, his patience fraying with every message that came through. It was clear. Park policy frowned on unnatural intervention, and their actions were already stirring debate. Some voices urged caution, let nature take its course. Others, moved by the rare act of a bobcat seeking help, quietly supported Evelyn's bold decision. "This is what happens when you cross the line, Ev," Marcus muttered, scribbling another note. "They're worried about setting precedent. Next thing, every animal gets rescued. The wild turns into a petting zoo." Evelyn shook her head, her jaw set with stubborn resolve. "I know the rules, but rules didn't climb through the snow begging for help. She did. He did. There's a difference, Marcus. Some things you just have to feel." Lucy whimpered, and Tyler pressed himself against her, his body tense, his golden eyes locked on Evelyn with desperate hope. A sudden, violent contraction seized Lucy's frame. Evelyn leaned in, flashlight balanced between her knees. For a moment, the world shrank to the frantic beat of Lucy's heart. "Marcus, I need your hands. Right now." He dropped the pen, coming to her side, eyes wide. "What is it?" She's starting to deliver, but something's wrong. The first kitten's stuck. If we don't help her, she's going to lose them all, and she might die too. Marcus swallowed. You're the boss. Tell me what to do. Working together, they gently helped Lucy, applying a delicate pressure, guiding the tiny form out into the cold world. Evelyn's hands shook as she freed the kitten, a fragile, wet bundle, limp at first. She rubbed it briskly with a towel, holding her breath until, at last, a tiny, reedy cry broke the silence. The relief was short-lived. Lucy, utterly spent, sagged against Tyler's side, eyes fluttering. Her breathing was worse now, the color draining from her gums. The next contraction brought only blood, not another kitten. Panic spiked in Evelyn's chest. She checked Lucy's pulse, felt the feeble beat, and realized how close they were to losing everything. Tyler's yowl, low, guttural, terrified, filled the tent. It echoed off the walls and slipped out into the trees, where the forest held its breath. Outside the ring of light, coyotes prowled, drawn by the scent of blood and the sound of struggle. Marcus grabbed the field kit, pressing a bag of fluids into Evelyn's hands. We can't lose her, Ev. Not after all this. The heater sputtered. The lantern flickered. Evelyn's mind raced with every bit of training she'd ever received. She hung a fresh IV, checked Lucy's airway, whispered urgent reassurances that were as much for herself as for the patient. The radio crackled with static. Headquarters demanded another update. A new voice now. Someone higher up, impatient and wary. Ranger Hayes, this is a serious breach of protocol. If you intervene and it goes wrong, you'll be held responsible. Do you understand? Evelyn stared at Lucy, then at Tyler, whose unwavering presence reminded her what was at stake. I understand, she replied quietly, barely able to keep the fear from her voice. But I'm not abandoning them. Not tonight. She handed the radio to Marcus, focusing all her attention on the next crisis. Blood pooled beneath Lucy's tail, her body convulsed, then stilled. The air was thick with the copper tang of survival. Outside, Tyler prowled the tent's edge, his yowls a fierce defiance against fate. Occasionally he'd dash away, eyes reflecting in the darkness, only to return, never straying far from his mate. His desperation infected the whole camp. No one, not animal or human, could rest. Inside, Evelyn worked on, sweat freezing on her brow, every muscle tight with concentration. The kitten, now dry and breathing, squirmed feebly beside Lucy's belly, rooting for warmth and life. The second and third kittens were slow to come. Each arrival was harder, the risk greater. Complications mounted. A tear, a moment when Lucy's breathing stopped, a frantic rush to clear her airway. All the while, the debate on the radio continued, voices arguing policy, precedent, and the purpose of the park. But inside the tent, there was only the relentless struggle, the kind that made laws seem meaningless, that forced you to face the real and terrible beauty of life at its edge. One wrong move, one missed sign, and everything could be lost. It was the kind of night that turned even the most seasoned ranger into a believer in miracles. As dawn's first gray hints crept into the sky, Evelyn sat back, exhausted and trembling, her hands stained but her heart pounding with a new hope. Lucy was still alive, barely, her breathing shallow, her body trembling. Beside her, 3 tiny kittens mewled softly, each breath a stubborn refusal to surrender. Tyler crept close, his nose brushing each new life in turn, his body curled protectively around Lucy and the fragile bundles of fur. His yowls softened, turning to purrs that vibrated through the blankets and into Evelyn's bones. For one brief, shining moment, the crisis held its breath. The wild, with all its cruelty and majesty, had not claimed them, not yet. For a few fleeting moments after the third kitten's cry broke through the stillness, it seemed as if the long night's struggle had finally shifted toward hope. Inside the field tent, the three newborn bobcats pressed blindly against Lucy's belly, tiny claws grasping for warmth and sustenance in a world they had not chosen but must now survive. Evelyn slumped back against a battered folding chair, exhaustion rolling over her in relentless waves, while Marcus exhaled a shaky sigh, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his trembling hand. But the wild never let its grip loosen so easily. As the kittens rooted and mewled, Lucy's body trembled violently. Her breath, ragged and shallow, stuttered and then faded into a terrifying silence. Evelyn's mind, dulled by fatigue, snapped instantly to focus. The tent filled with a raw, electric panic. "No, no, no! Come on, Lucy!" Evelyn barked, her voice sharp enough to slice through the haze. Tyler leapt to his feet, tail lashing, a guttural yowl rising from deep within his chest. For a heartbeat, the only sounds were the kitten's faint cries and the whirring of the portable oxygen machine. Marcus reached for the radio, but Evelyn shot him a look that made him freeze. "I need you here, now!" Training took over. Evelyn pushed aside fear, checking Lucy's airway, feeling desperately for a pulse. For one awful second there was nothing, just a void where life should have been. She grabbed the emergency adrenaline, injected it with trembling hands, and began gentle chest compressions. 1, 2, 3, breath. Over and over, willing Lucy's stubborn heart to fight back. "Come on, girl," she murmured, tears threatening but never falling. "You're not leaving them. Not tonight. Not after all this." Tyler, inches away, pressed his nose to Lucy's cheek, his purr now a desperate, trembling thing. Marcus steadied the oxygen mask while Evelyn kept working, her world reduced to the rhythm of breath and hope. A minute passed. 2. The kittens whimpered, blind and helpless, their lives hanging by the thinnest of threads. Outside the tent, coyotes called to one another, hunger in their voices, a reminder that the line between life and death was never thicker than a pane of glass. Just as Evelyn's arms began to shake, Lucy coughed. A small, rough sound, but enough. Her sides twitched. Then, like a reluctant engine catching, her heart stuttered and began to beat again, weak but present. Breath returned, shallow but there. "Yes," Marcus choked out, relief loosening something deep inside him. Evelyn sagged, her head dropping as adrenaline faded. She wiped her face with a shaking hand, then leaned in, checking the kittens, gently guiding them to Lucy's belly. Tyler crept closer, tentatively touching Lucy's paw with his own, as if anchoring her to this side of the world. For a while, nobody spoke. The crisis wasn't truly over, but the worst, death's cold hand, had been pushed back. The tent was quiet, filled only with the sounds of fragile, persistent life. The flutter of tiny lungs, Lucy's soft breathing, and Tyler's low, steady purr. It was hope, raw and fierce. But the world outside was not so easily convinced. The radio, which had been silent during the emergency, now crackled with renewed urgency. "Ranger Hayes, update. What's your status? We have senior staff on the line." Marcus pressed the transmitter. "Mother and kittens are alive. Complications, but stable for now. We're monitoring." A pause, then a stern, uncertain voice. "You understand the implications, Ranger. This goes beyond policy. This is on you." Evelyn didn't answer. She couldn't. All her attention was fixed on the small family before her. She saw Lucy's eyelids flutter, watched as the bobcat tried, weakly but unmistakably, to nuzzle her kittens. One managed to latch, and for a moment, Evelyn let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this gamble would pay off. But the ordeal had left Lucy dangerously weak. Evelyn knew the next hours would be critical. Infection, shock, even simple exhaustion could steal her away. She cleaned the wounds, administered more fluids, and watched for any signs of decline. She urged Marcus to rest, but he refused, eyes flickering constantly between the mother and the radio. Outside the tent, the forest remained alert. The moon, pale and pitiless, looked down through a crack in the clouds. Tyler slipped outside once or twice, patrolling the perimeter with a low, urgent growl. Each time he returned to Lucy's side, unwilling to leave her unguarded. Sometime before dawn, a vehicle's headlights danced through the trees, the backup team from headquarters. Evelyn stepped outside to meet them, feeling the tension thrum in her bones. Two senior rangers stepped out, their faces hard with worry and questions. "Ranger Hayes, you know this is an unprecedented intervention," one began, voice stern. Evelyn nodded, unflinching. "She came to us. He asked for help. We responded as best we could." The rangers exchanged glances. One muttered, "It's a story, that's for sure." Inside the tent, Lucy stirred again, letting out a rough, defiant purr as her kittens nursed. Tyler watched, eyes unblinking, every muscle tense but hopeful. For Evelyn, the events of the night condensed into a single truth. Sometimes, hope is born in the smallest, fiercest moments. A wild father's desperate yowl, a ranger's trembling hands, a mother's refusal to let go. The wild would have its say. The odds were never fair, but in that little tent, against every rule and every expectation, life, messy, miraculous, unpredictable, had been given another chance. As dawn's first blush crept over Yellowstone, painting the snow in lavender and gold, Evelyn allowed herself to breathe again. The battle wasn't over, but for now, hope had teeth, and it had survived the night. Night finally surrendered to the soft wash of morning, pale blue and gold stretching through the Yellowstone pines. The storm of adrenaline and emergency had passed, but its echo lingered in the bones and hearts of everyone who'd fought through the long night. The field tent, battered but still standing, seemed to breathe a little easier, as if the world itself was exhaling at last. Inside, the family of bobcats huddled in a loose circle of warmth and hope. Lucy was conscious, though exhaustion weighted her every movement. She lay curled around her 3 kittens, nudging them gently to her belly, her eyes half-lidded but alert. Tyler, for the first time in many hours, allowed himself to truly rest, his head low beside Lucy's flank, his tail draped over her in a protective sweep. His ears flicked at every distant sound, but the fierce panic was gone, replaced by a watchful contentment. Evelyn leaned against a folding table, hands wrapped around a tin mug of cooling coffee. Her face was smudged with dirt and fatigue, but her eyes were bright, brighter than they'd been in years. Across from her, Marcus finally surrendered to exhaustion, snoring quietly atop a pile of jackets, boots still muddy from the night's ordeal. Sunlight filtered through the tent's seams, glinting on the mess of medical gear and discarded wrappers. The world outside was waking up. Robins chirped, squirrels chattered, and the distant sound of a ranger's four-wheeler bounced along the forest trail. Everything felt softer in the daylight. the sense of dread replaced with a gentle, almost fragile sense of victory. Lucy's breath had steadied, and the color was returning to her gums. She cleaned her kittens, one by one, with slow, deliberate licks. The smallest, a pale, mottled female, cried out, hungry and insistent, and Lucy nudged her closer, curling her body to create a wall of warmth. Tyler watched, pride and worry mingling in his gaze, his role as protector expanding now to include his tiny, blind offspring. Evelyn knelt beside them, quietly swapping IV fluids and checking wounds with a light touch. "You're doing great, Mama," she whispered, smiling at the kitten's wobbly attempts to nurse. "You did the impossible." For a while she simply sat and watched. The wild world made small, focused entirely on the family before her. Each detail shimmered with meaning. Lucy's ear flicking, Tyler's gentle purr, the kitten's fragile breaths. It was more than survival. It was connection. A moment where two worlds had collided, and for once, made something beautiful together. News of the rescue spread fast. By mid-morning, a handful of rangers gathered near the field tent, voices low, faces a mix of skepticism and awe. Word traveled to visitors, too. Tourists who'd come for the geysers or the bison found themselves drawn to the story of the Bobcat family and the rangers who'd risked their jobs for a chance at life. Children crowded at the edge of the roped-off clearing, pointing at Tyler when he ventured outside to scout the perimeter. Some volunteers arrived, bringing extra blankets, bottles of spring water, even a stuffed rabbit someone had found in the visitor center. Evelyn accepted the help, grateful and a little overwhelmed. "It's not every day you get to see this," an older ranger murmured to her, eyes shining. "You made the right call, Hayes, even if the bosses never say it." Evelyn shrugged, hiding the tears that threatened to rise. "She came to us. What else could we do?" One of the senior staff, stern and pragmatic, hovered at the edge, radio crackling at his hip. But even he, after watching Lucy nuzzle her kittens, seemed moved to silence. "I'll file the paperwork," he said quietly. "I think the world can survive one small miracle." The Bobcats remained the center of quiet attention. Tyler was never far from Lucy's side, his yowls now soft purrs, reassurance to his mate and warning to any threat that might linger in the woods. Once, as a curious crow landed on the tent, Tyler bolted out, sending it flapping away in a storm of black feathers. The other rangers chuckled, admiring his devotion. Evelyn sat in the tent, resting her chin on her knees, and let herself feel something she'd rarely allowed before. Pride. Not the boastful kind, but a quiet, hard-won certainty that, just this once, her instincts had served her, and the world, well. She'd defied the rules, trusted her heart, and found something stronger than policy or fear, a partnership with the wild. Marcus woke with a groan, rubbing his eyes. "Did I miss the world ending?" he joked. Then, seeing Lucy and the kittens, let out a long, relieved sigh. "Guess we made it." Evelyn grinned. "They made it. We just helped." The moment lingered, sacred almost. No one moved to break the silence. Even the park's natural rhythms seemed gentler, as if acknowledging that something extraordinary had happened beneath the pines. A little after noon, Lucy lifted her head, eyes clear and calm. She gazed at Evelyn and Marcus for a long moment, something passing between species that had nothing to do with words and everything to do with trust. Then she curled around her kittens, content. As the sun climbed higher, visitors drifted away, but the story took root. Rangers found themselves talking about what had happened, questioning old assumptions. Some, like Marcus, began to see the wild as less of a battlefield and more of a community, one where compassion had its place. Evelyn packed up her gear, finally letting herself rest. She leaned against a pine tree, feeling the rough bark against her back, and watched Tyler and Lucy, their kittens squirming between them. The world felt bigger, possibilities wider. The wild does not belong to any of us, she realized, but sometimes we're asked to be its hands. The next several days unfolded in a slow, quiet miracle. Spring's grip tightened, coaxing green from the damp earth and coaxing hope from everyone who'd stood vigil through that desperate night. The tent stayed in its clearing, now a symbol more than a shelter, its canvas walls whispering stories to each visitor who dared pause and listen. Lucy, though still weak, grew stronger with every sunrise. Her eyes regained their clear, sharp focus. She kept her kittens close, washing them with gentle, deliberate licks, nudging them to her belly when they grew restless. The smallest was always the most insistent, mewing loudly until Lucy curled her body tighter, a living shield against the world. Tyler hunted tirelessly, never straying far, but bringing back mice and voles, proof that life, for now, was winning. Evelyn spent each morning kneeling in the dew, watching the Bobcat family through the tent's open flap. She'd never seen wild animals this close for so long, never witnessed a mother's patience or a father's stubborn watchfulness up close. It changed her in subtle ways, reshaping what she thought she knew about the divide between us and them. Sometimes, when she was alone, she'd whisper her gratitude, thanking Lucy for letting her bear witness, for trusting her with a story too fragile for most to hold. Marcus, too, changed. He found himself making excuses to check on the tent, sometimes staying longer than needed, losing track of time as he watched the kittens tumble over each other or nap, warm and trusting, between their parents. Once he caught himself grinning, the old cynicism softening in the warmth of the scene. "Never thought I'd see the day," he muttered, half in disbelief. Word of the Bobcat family's ordeal spread throughout the park and beyond. Tourists hiked out to see the roped-off area, peering with quiet awe. Volunteers brought food and supplies. Teachers wove the story into their lessons about empathy and stewardship. Even some of the most stoic rangers admitted that something in them had shifted. It was more than survival. It was a lesson, a message scrawled in paw prints and hope. Evelyn, reflecting in her small cabin after her shift, wrote in her journal, "I used to think that wildness meant aloneness, that to be truly wild, you had to shut the world out. But these bobcats, Lucy, Tyler, their babies, they remind me that strength is sometimes found in asking for help, that humility is not weakness, but the courage to know you cannot do everything on your own." She recalled the moment Tyler's yowl had cut through the dark, a plea not just to other animals, but to the world itself. "Help. I can't do this alone." That cry had traveled further than either bobcat could know, reaching hearts on 2 legs and 4, breaking the ancient rule of separation between humans and wild. As Lucy's strength returned and her kittens nursed, a new respect bloomed in the hearts of the rangers. Even the policymakers at headquarters, usually so strict about non-intervention, found themselves rethinking old boundaries. A quiet debate grew among staff. Was letting nature be always the highest good? Or did true stewardship sometimes mean reaching across the divide when the wild called out for help? One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and violet, Evelyn and Marcus sat by the river, the tent just visible through the trees. The roar of melting snow filled the air, but both rangers were lost in thought. I keep thinking about that line, Marcus said quietly. Between helping and interfering. We always said it was clear, but now... He trailed off, shaking his head. Evelyn tossed a pebble into the current. It's not clear. Maybe it never was. Maybe wildness isn't about who keeps their distance. Maybe it's about who cares enough to answer when the world needs you. They sat in silence, the air heavy with the scent of pine and thawed earth. Above them, a hawk circled, its shadow flickering over the river. The world went on, indifferent, yet suddenly more connected. The story of the bobcats rippled through the park's community. More visitors asked about conservation, about volunteering. Donations arrived, enough to fund new programs for both wildlife and education. Evelyn watched this groundswell with a quiet pride. She realized that the night in the tent wasn't just about saving one family. It was about rekindling hope, reminding people that the wild, while fierce and sometimes cruel, had room for grace. Lucy, Tyler, and their kittens became symbols of resilience, of the courage to be vulnerable, of the power of connection in the harshest times. The line between human and nature had blurred, replaced by partnership and respect. No longer was the wild a separate world, to be observed from a distance. It was a community, and everyone, animal or human, had a role to play. One morning, after the kittens had opened their eyes, Evelyn knelt at the edge of the tent. Lucy looked up, her gaze steady. For a heartbeat, Evelyn felt the full weight of what had happened. Not just a rescue, but a transformation. A lesson written in snow and fur, one she would carry forever. True love, animal or human, meant standing by each other, especially when the world was at its harshest. Wildness didn't mean isolation. Sometimes the strongest survived because they allowed others to care. Evelyn closed her journal, looking out across the sunlit meadow. She felt it in her bones. This was not just a story about bobcats. It was a story about all of them, about the wildness inside each heart, and about what happens when you choose to answer the call. The grip of winter finally loosened its hold on Yellowstone, and spring came in full, vibrant force. Rivers, once menacing and swollen, tumbled clear and fast, churning away the last patches of dirty snow. Sunlight stretched further into the woods each day, coaxing wildflowers and new shoots of grass from the thawing ground. It was a season of beginnings, and for Lucy, Tyler, and their 3 kittens, it was the start of something neither wild animal nor human could have predicted. By now, the bobcat family had grown stronger. Lucy's limp was gone, her coat sleek again, her green eyes alert and keen as she moved through the brush. The kittens, round-bellied and playful, chased each other across rocks and tangled roots, while Tyler watched from a distance. Always vigilant, always present. Their territory was now near the river, a quiet spot with soft grass for hiding, sun-warmed stones for napping, and easy access to water and prey. The den that once echoed with Lucy's pain and the desperate cries of birth had fallen silent, reclaimed by the forest. Now, only the gentle imprint of tiny paws in the mud and the occasional glint of fur marked where a miracle had occurred. Rangers and visitors alike caught glimpses of the family, always at a respectful distance. Sometimes a child would spot a kitten's tail flicking through the grass, or a group of hikers would freeze, breathless, as Lucy appeared for just a heartbeat before melting back into the wild. Each sighting sent a ripple of excitement through the park. People whispered about the mother who'd survived against the odds, the mate who'd risked everything, the rangers who'd bent the rules and found redemption in the eyes of the wild. Evelyn, for her part, made a ritual of checking for signs of the bobcats on her morning patrols. She learned to read their passing, the prints in soft mud, the feathers from a late-night hunt, a kitten's half-chewed stick left behind in play. Each trace felt like a quiet thank you, proof that compassion, when given at the right moment, could echo through an entire landscape. But it wasn't just the bobcats who had changed. The story had settled deep into the heart of the park's community. Visitors who'd once come for geysers and hot springs lingered at the visitor center, drawn in by the tale of the long night and the unlikely alliance. Donations increased, some from families who sent small notes about the wild animals that had changed their lives, some from people who'd never set foot in Yellowstone, but were moved by the story. Volunteers signed up in record numbers, eager to be part of a place where kindness and wildness could exist side by side. For Evelyn, the impact was deeply personal. She found herself sharing the bobcat's journey with school groups and old friends, her voice steady, but eyes shining each time she told it. She saw a change in Marcus, too, less guarded, more willing to let hope color his days. Together, they watched as the park's philosophy evolved, from strict non-intervention to a more nuanced, compassionate stewardship. It wasn't about controlling nature, but about knowing when to reach across the line and offer a hand. One morning in late spring, as golden light spilled over the riverbank, Evelyn spotted Lucy and Tyler with their kittens perched on a fallen log. The young ones tumbled and pounced, their play punctuated by sudden, clumsy attempts at stalking a grasshopper. Lucy lounged nearby, her head resting on her paws, a picture of wild serenity. Tyler, always on alert, lifted his head at the slightest rustle, but relaxed when he saw it was only a ranger in the distance. Evelyn crouched in the grass, careful not to intrude. She felt a surge of pride and awe, not for what she had done, but for what had grown from a single night of courage. The family was thriving, a living testament to resilience and trust. As she watched, Lucy glanced up, her gaze meeting Evelyn's across the divide. There was no fear, only calm recognition, the kind of look that passes between old friends who understand more than words can say. News of the family's success continued to spread. Local papers published articles about the miracle bobcats of Yellowstone. Wildlife photographers, usually focused on larger, flashier animals, now came hoping for a glimpse of the kittens. But the family kept its distance, never lingering long in any one place, always moving together, always wild. Among the park's staff, something fundamental had shifted. Conservation meetings became more animated, the old debates about hands-off management giving way to conversations about partnership, respect, and timing. New training modules were created, focused not just on policy, but on ethics, how to balance letting nature take its course with the moral responsibility to act when a life or a legacy hung in the balance. The effects reached further still. People across the country, inspired by the story, wrote letters to the park, to the rangers, to anyone who would listen. Some shared tales of animals they'd loved and lost. Some confessed to seeing the wild world with new eyes. Hope, it seemed, was contagious. Evelyn, reflecting on these changes, realized it was never just about one family. The night she and Marcus spent in that field tent had rippled outward, transforming hearts and minds, shaping a new philosophy of conservation, one that left space for compassion and courage. The lesson was clear. Every act of bravery or kindness, no matter how small, echoed through the world, inspiring hope even in the wildest places. As the sun slipped lower and the bobcat family vanished into the golden grass, Evelyn smiled, the warmth of that truth settling deep inside her. Maybe in helping the wild, we learn how to be more fully human ourselves. For me, this isn't just a story about bobcats. It's about the invisible threads that tie us all together, across species, landscapes, and lifetimes. It's about the way a desperate cry in the dark can change the fate of a family, and how a moment of compassion can echo far beyond what we see. Long after Lucy and Tyler faded into the sheltering woods with their 3 rambunctious kittens, their story lived on. It lived in the tracks left behind in river mud, in the laughter of children who'd glimpsed a bobcat for the first time, in the hush that fell over the ranger station every time someone told the story of the long night. For everyone who witnessed it, whether in person, by rumor, or through a photograph in the local paper, the story became a touchstone, a way of remembering what matters most when life is stripped bare. Sometimes I walk the same trails where we first heard Tyler's yowl, a call thick with love, terror, and defiance. I pause at the old den, reclaimed now by grass and wind, and I think of everything that began there. A mother's agony, a father's courage, the stubborn persistence of hope. I remember how small and powerless I felt that night, and how, in spite of fear and protocol, I chose to answer a plea for help. That choice became the difference between life and death, not just for one family, but for a community that learned, through the eyes of the wild, that compassion is never wasted. There are nights when the world feels just as dark, just as cold as it did then. There are days when doubt creeps in and the rules feel heavier than the work itself. But whenever I feel lost, I remember what I saw in Lucy's eyes as she clung to her kittens, or in Tyler's unwavering presence beside her. I remember the moment when, against all odds, breath returned and 3 small lives burst into the world. I remember how, sometimes, the only thing that keeps us moving forward is love, a love that won't let go, no matter the odds. If you have someone, human or animal, who stood by you in hard times, maybe give them an extra hug tonight. Maybe tell them what they mean to you. The wild teaches us that survival isn't just about being strong. It's about holding on, even when the storm seems endless. It's about reaching out for help, and about answering when someone else calls. Sometimes the smallest moments, the ones no one else sees, are the ones that shape everything. A ranger kneeling beside a dying animal, a partner staying awake through the night, a community deciding that the rules must sometimes bend for the sake of a greater good. Every act of courage or kindness, every hand reached across the gap, leaves a mark. It ripples outward, finding its way into stories, into hearts, into the ways we choose to live and care. Lucy and Tyler's family thrived, but the real miracle was the change in all of us. The park's staff grew closer, united by something more powerful than policy, a shared memory of what it meant to do the right thing, even when it was hard. Visitors left with a deeper respect for the wild, seeing not just animals, but neighbors, fellow travelers on the same path. Volunteers stayed longer, and donations grew. The wild seemed a little less distant, a little more familiar, because of one night's hard-won hope. As for me, I carry that hope with me everywhere I go. I see it in the sunrise over Yellowstone's peaks, in the gentle eyes of a fawn crossing the road, in the stubborn dandelions that break through cracks in the concrete. I see it in every parent who refuses to give up, every friend who stands by someone in need, every stranger who stops to listen when another voice calls out. The wild does not belong to us, but sometimes it needs us. And sometimes we need it too, not just for adventure or beauty, but for the lessons it offers about love, courage, and connection. If you find yourself standing at the edge of a hard choice, I hope you remember Lucy and Tyler and the way a single act of compassion can change the world. So if this story moved you, please share it with someone who might need hope, or leave a comment about your own wild moments. Like, follow, or subscribe for more stories of resilience, and help us keep the wild alive, not just in the parks, but in our hearts. Take a breath, look around, and notice the wildness that lives in all of us. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to hold on. Sometimes the kindest thing is to answer a call for help. And sometimes, love is the thread that weaves us all together, no matter how fierce the storm. In the end, that's what keeps the world turning. The small, persistent, everyday acts of courage and care that remind us we're never truly alone. Maybe, just maybe, that's what it means to be wild, and to be fully, deeply human.